First, I would just like to say that progression plans are really not something that we have come up with. It's just a list of sub-goals. So you set an end goal that is specific and measurable, and then you cut it down into sub-goals. And I would say that's the normal way to do it for training of humans in all sorts of disciplines, whether it's firefighters or shooting in the military or whatever. You have an end goal, and then you cut it up into smaller sub-goals that you should reach. And this is just doing the same for dogs. And I don't know, I don't remember when we started to do that. I think it was just out of necessity, because when we have the responsibility, which we have had for more than 20 years, for different government dog programs and the dog handlers in them, to make sure they are developing and being able to meet the criteria of the certification every year. The variation in how dogs respond and the variation in the tasks that the dog teams meet is so huge. So when we just tell the dog handler that you should do exactly this way to teach your dog this, we often fall short, because then they do that and it works. But one day later they are home, and then they are to take the next step, and then we or another instructor is not there, and then they have many times no idea how to do it. So then they are faced with trial and error. So we just started to do it as a way of helping the dog handlers to bridge the gaps when they don't have instructors there 24 hours a day. By just providing the sub-goals, we can then give them a path of which behaviors or skills are better to teach in the beginning. And by making the sub-goals specific, we can also regulate the level of arousal in these needed to accomplish the different steps. And we can also make sure that they are not using luring more than in the very, very first steps of training a certain behavior, because often it becomes a habit for the human, and then it's hard to get rid of. So all these small things we can actually control a bit by having control of the order in which the different behaviors are taught in the sub-goals. But exactly how and exactly with what reinforcer, we don't really mess with that, because that will vary a lot between different dog individuals and humans. So the progression plan just tells you what the dog should be able to do, and we try to make the difference in difficulty as small as possible between the steps. So once you have reached step 20, it should be easy to reach the next step, and then the next step.
I feel like without your progression plans, it's kind of like giving a trainer a loaf of bread and giving you a loaf of bread and saying how many pieces, and they're going to cut it into like 4 pieces, the whole loaf, and you're going to cut it into like 50 pieces.
That was a very good illustration.
Yes.
I will steal that.
That's just a visual I always have, where I'm like, if I give it to this new trainer, they're going to be like, oh, this is good about here and about there, and it's not even evenly spaced. And yours are like precisely measured, evenly spaced, like here is how we're going to have success.
Yes. So I find that the big thing with the progression plans is, one, it makes you set a specific and measurable end goal, because if you don't have that, you cannot really make sub-goals. And if you're not able to make a specific and measurable end goal, you will have to use mine or someone else's, and the progression plan that comes with that, it will still be better to borrow someone else's end goal than to not have any at all. And if you're new in the dog training field, like most police or military dog handlers, they don't have the possibility to decide what is a realistic end goal, because they have not trained many dogs before. So it would be unfair to force them to decide that. Yeah, I think there are so many benefits. Maybe the largest one is that it allows you to evaluate the effects of your training continuously, not once or twice a year when you have your certification, but all the time. Almost after each training session, you get to know if you have had progress or regressed or is just standing still. And then you need to change something. But if you fail your annual certification, you just know that something I did during the last 12 months wasn't perfect. But exactly what is very hard to identify. So I think that's the biggest advantage. And maybe another is, let's say I am driving and I need to stop and just let the dogs out to pee. So then I have a 5 or 10 minute chance to do training. And what most typically happens then is that you train on something that the dog already knows how to do. But if you have a progression plan that someone else has done or that you have made yourself, then you can just look up and see what is the next step. So that way you will always have progression and push forward. And I find that really beneficial.